Hello, I'm Todd Phillips, the editor of Canadian Auto Dealer. We're joined here today by Michael Robinet. He's the Vice President of Forecast Strategy at S&P Global Mobility. He's a respected auto industry analyst, a Canadian one, happens to be working in the States, and he's bringing some of his thoughts to the 2026 CADA Summit in February. Michael, thanks for joining us.
Todd, great to be here.
Well, not to understate the obvious, but being in the forecasting industry, certainly in auto retail or any industry right now, is a tricky business at the best of times. And in today's auto industry, it must be damn near impossible to really get a good beat on what exactly is happening. So before we dial into the summit, I'm curious what you and your colleagues doing to try to, look at the landscape and do you have to invent some new tools or are the current forecasting tools working for you in this kind of environment?
I would say, great perspective. The last 5 or 6 years have been calamity after calamity. We had a strike in 2019. We, of course, had COVID in 20, COVID in 21, a little bit less COVID in 22. Then we had chips in 21, chips in 22. We had another strike in 2023. We obviously had the Russia-Ukraine conflict kind of mix its way into there. Then we had 2024 was actually relatively calm. Everybody took a little bit of a breath. And then, of course, the election in November, where the U.S. administration shifted and is really, added another nuance for the industry to deal with in 2025, whether it be changing emissions legislation, as well as, of course, the tariffs that are on everybody's mind these days. So to answer your question, as a setup, there's been a lot going on, and we've really needed to rethink the way that we approach the market. We're doing a lot more scenario work than we ever did before. Before it was good enough to do just a base forecast, and sometimes a client would add 5% on top or take 5% off to bound it a little bit. But now we're having to run very specific scenarios. What if this occurs? What if that occurs? What if the tariff reaches this level? So we're working our way through all of that. And we're having to develop some new tools to do that. So it is a challenging environment. One hopes and wished for a relatively stable one, but that's not the case.
Well, we'll give you some grace at the summit this year if you get up and deliver a forecast, because we'll understand on the one hand that if this, if that is very unpredictable. Nonetheless, dealers in the room will be very curious to hear about, your outlook for the auto industry. Now, we'll obviously dial in closer to sort of dealers, the issues that dealers care about, but some of the, the top line issues that you're going to be presenting at the summit for them to mull over.
Well, I think certainly dealers want to better understand what they're going to be selling in the future and to who and at what prices. We'll talk about a little bit about cadence. Cadence is the view of how often new products are coming along. And given the basically flattened emissions legislation from the United States and to an extent what we're going to be seeing out of Canada, it's an environment where the OEMs, the vehicle manufacturers, are really going to be doing more work on the outside of the vehicle, on the top hat, maybe adding some new comforts, more convenience features, more autonomous capability, and worrying a lot less about I need to lightweight the vehicle, so therefore I'm going to build a brand new platform that is 100 kilos lighter than what we had before. They don't need to do that. So I think the OEMs are going to be thinking in a very much a capital light type structure going forward. They spend a lot of money going to battery electric or BEVing, as I've turned it into a verb. And that BEVing is quite expensive, and in just about every case, it really hasn't paid off. So it's been a really challenging environment. Add to that all the compliance work that's had to occur as well on top of that, and now dealing with the tariffs and not knowing what the optimal sourcing strategy is going to be. These are all, issues that I think we definitely dealers are going to want to better understand. So cadence, tariffs, and then we'll tackle some other issues as well.
Well, for OEMs for a second, I mean, dealers have to deal with the inventory that is, rolls off the trucks at their lot, and they have some control over, ordering, but pretty much the bulk of all this chaos is really on the OEM front. Can you give a sense of how it's affecting different brands differently in terms of the procurement of vehicles and even the models? There's a lot of sort of shifts in what dealers might be able to expect to be rolling off those trucks, right? From the various brands.
No, a really good point. I think you're going to find that some OEMs are going to be a little bit more flexible than others. I would say propulsion, PSD as we call it, propulsion system design flexibility is going to be part and parcel to being competitive. So that, mom and pop Smith, as they walk up to the dealership and they're looking for a C segment crossover utility, are they going to have to buy an ICE? Can they get one that's a mild hybrid? Can they get one that's a full hybrid? And what are the different options that are available? So flexibility, economies of scale are really going to be calling cards. And I think, tomorrow's OEM or today and eventually tomorrow's OEM, that is going to be a huge differentiator going forward is the ability to satisfy the customer with the right price point, but also give them some options in terms of that propulsion system design.
You mentioned the pricing and pricing options. I know vehicle affordability is a growing concern on both sides of the border, but certainly the CADA, the National Dealer Association up here, has been raising it in their conversations with the federal government over things like ZEV mandates and an affordability linked together. So what do you see that pressure, I guess, at the consumer end for because you mentioned all the issues before the disruption supply chain that really led to a more expensive product, when there are fewer chips available. But what's happening kind of in that pipeline? Can dealers expect, any lower entry models to be coming to their showrooms?
Well, I mean, it's you've got positives and negatives in that respect. I guess the positive would be as the emissions legislation is let's say tamped down a bit in Canada. It's been more or less eliminated in the United States, but at least tamped down in Canada. Remember, Canada gets a good number of its vehicles from the United States. So if the U.S. decides that, hey, we're going to flatten the emissions legislation, and that's really going to uh, put a pinch on battery electric vehicle portfolio, that's going to have a fallout in Canada. Canada is not going to be able to import what it needs from a BEV perspective from Europe, from Japan, from Korea, or other locations. So again, the US is critical and it is going to be a dictator. So I think that's one aspect. So, certainly from an affordability perspective, that may be a bit of a positive. Certainly the big negative in the room is going to be, what happens with tariffs? Are prices of vehicles going to go up because we may have countervailing tariffs from the United States? What eventually is going to happen in the US, Canada, or a U.S. Canada bilateral agreement, U.S. Mexico bilateral agreement, whatever we're going to have with Mexico and Canada. So again, these are all open issues, but I'd say there's some positives and negatives there. But you are right. I mean, the vehicles are getting tremendously more expensive, and the number of vehicles at the lower end is declining every day because obviously the vehicle manufacturers in this environment need to make money. And if they're not going to be able to make money at the low end, they're going to keep moving up the chain so they can find a place to make money. But it's going to put a real pinch on moving young consumers and low income consumers into the fleet and then moving them up. That's going to be a real challenge.
Well, one answer, I guess some argue, certainly environmental groups who are advocating for more EVs, is Chinese OEMs who are currently, almost tariffed out of our market. What's your expectation in the years to come? Maybe not in 2026, but since you're a forecaster, I know you're not a crystal ball gazer, but a forecaster nonetheless. What's your sense of when, we might see some of those brands starting to set up shop in Canada? What's your sense of?
Sure. Well, just to correct you, we use a dartboard over here. But nonetheless, no, it's a very good point. This is a question we get virtually every day, and I talk to clients about the Chinese OEMs and the fact that it's so much different than when the Japanese came into the market, in real earnest 40 years ago, and then the Koreans came in maybe 25 years ago. Both of them had the leverage of greater efficiency, listening to the customer, flexibility, suppliers that were aligned, all that type of thing. The Chinese come much differently. They come with a government that is supporting them significantly. They come with scale. I mean, let's call it for what it is. China is almost three times the size of the US market in terms of production. And actually almost twice the size of North American total, US, Canada, Mexico. So think about the scale that allows. They come with leverage. They come with rare earth elements and critical minerals that, basically government and others have significant sway in. So it's just different. And I think what's happened is that the Chinese have essentially said, okay, you're not going to let me into the US or Canada. That's fine. I'll look to other markets. And they, as has been well publicized, they are scooping up market share like nobody's business. And markets, well, we've heard a lot about Mexico, but all you need to do is go to Thailand, go to Brazil, go to markets like Saudi Arabia, and markets all over the world, to basically see them grow. So to answer your question, are the Chinese coming? I think it's sort of like death and taxes. Yes, they are coming. They are likely not going to come over the next couple of years, mainly because of geopolitical issues and the like. But eventually, Chinese OEMs and/or vehicles in some way, shape, or form are going to be in our market. It may not be till the next decade. It'll probably be through acquisition into an OEM or entity that's found in the United States or Canada. But nonetheless, that they will be coming. It's just a matter of when.
Well, I could talk to you a lot longer, but we don't want to steal the thunder from your CAD Summit presentation. We want dealers to attend, hear more of this good stuff in person. And the good news is, we're having this chat in November. By February, who knows? All bets are off. Could be all fresh material. So thanks for joining us today, Mike.
Todd, have a great day.